the Council's judgment. The Galactic Assembly Chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of perfectly engineered space, a monument to 1,000 civilizations that had learned to coexist among the stars. The walls were made of living crystal that shifted colors based on the emotional temperature of the room, and today they pulsed with shades of cold blue and dismissive gray. 700 delegates from across the galaxy sat in their designated sections, their forms as varied as the worlds they represented. Some breathed methane, others existed as pure energy contained in specialized fields, and still others were collective consciousnesses speaking through chosen representatives. At the center of it all stood Dr. Sarah Chin, representing a species that had been trying to join this assembly for nearly a century. She was a woman in her 50s with silver threading through her dark hair and eyes that had seen too many diplomatic failures. She wore the formal uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps, a simple navy blue suit with a small patch showing a green and blue planet. In her hands she carried a single data tablet and a sealed container no larger than a jewelry box. The chamber's acoustics were perfect, designed so that even a whisper from the center could be heard in the farthest seats. Dr. Chin did not need to raise her voice as she concluded her presentation. Behind her, holographic images showed Earth's transformation over the past 50 years. Cities powered entirely by renewable energy. Oceans cleaned of pollution. A global government that had ended all major conflicts. Scientific advances in medicine, engineering, and space travel. It was an impressive record by any measure. High Chancellor Vorith presided over the assembly from an elevated platform that dominated the chamber. He was a Zenthari, a species that resembled a bipedal mantis with iridescent green exoskeleton and 4 arms that moved with deliberate grace. His compound eyes reflected the holographic displays as he studied the human ambassador with an expression that might have been boredom or contempt. It was difficult to tell with the Zenthari. Ambassador Chin, Vorith's voice resonated through the chamber with a harmonic quality that came from speaking through specialized vocal chambers. You have presented Earth's accomplishments with admirable thoroughness. However, this is humanity's 3rd petition for membership in the Galactic Assembly. The first was denied 75 years ago. The second was denied 25 years ago. Nothing you have shown us today changes the fundamental concerns that led to those denials. A ripple of agreement moved through the chamber. Dr. Chin had expected this. She had studied the transcripts of the previous hearings. She knew every argument that would be raised against her species. Representative Krill stood up in the Aquarian section. His species lived in liquid-filled chambers and spoke through translation devices. The human historical record is undeniable. Your species has engaged in continuous warfare for your entire recorded history. You have created weapons capable of destroying your own planet multiple times over. Even now, despite your claims of peace, every human nation maintains military forces. We maintain defensive capabilities, Dr. Chin responded calmly. As do most species in this assembly. The difference is that we no longer use them against each other. For now, interjected Ambassador Threll, a Corvian whose species resembled large, intelligent birds with 4 wings and feathers that changed color with their mood. Currently, his feathers showed skeptical orange patterns. Your species has enjoyed peace before, only to descend back into violence. The Pax Romana lasted centuries before collapsing. Your League of Nations failed within decades. How can we trust that this current peace is any different? Dr. Chin took a breath before responding. Because we learned from those failures. Because we built institutions that address the root causes of conflict rather than merely suppressing symptoms. Because we have spent 3 generations teaching our children that cooperation is stronger than competition. Words, said Counselor Vess, a Lithian whose crystalline body chimed softly as she spoke. We have observed your entertainment media, Dr. Chin. Your stories still glorify violence. Your children play games that simulate warfare. Your deepest myths celebrate warrior heroes. You cannot separate yourselves from your nature. Our nature, Dr. Chin said quietly, is also to protect the weak, to heal the sick, to reach for the stars despite knowing we might fail. You judge us by our capacity for violence while ignoring our capacity for compassion. High Chancellor Vorith raised one of his 4 hands, and the chamber fell silent. The Galactic Assembly was formed 8,000 years ago after the Convergence Wars nearly destroyed civilized space. We created strict criteria for membership to ensure that such catastrophe never happens again. Species must demonstrate not just technological capability, but emotional stability and rational decision-making. Humans, by every psychological profile we have conducted, are driven by emotion rather than logic. You act on instinct and passion. You form irrational attachments. You make decisions based on abstract concepts like honor and loyalty rather than optimal outcomes. And that, said Ambassador Quelm of the Rational Collective, a hive mind that spoke through a single representative body, makes you fundamentally incompatible with civilized galactic society. We do not deny your achievements, Dr. Chin. We simply recognize that your species is not ready for the responsibilities that come with assembly membership. Perhaps in another century or two, after more maturation. The vote was called. The chamber's displays showed the results in real time as each delegation entered their decision. Dr. Chin watched the numbers climb. 683 votes against admission. 17 votes in favor, mostly from younger species who still remembered what it was like to be judged and found wanting. 0 abstentions. High Chancellor Voritha's voice carried no satisfaction or regret, only the flat certainty of inevitability. The petition of the human species for membership in the Galactic Assembly is hereby denied. Earth may reapply in 50 standard years. This concludes the hearing. He began to rise from his seat, already dismissing the humans from his mind. That was when Dr. Chin spoke again, her voice cutting through the murmur of conversation that had begun in the chamber. High Chancellor, I request permission to present additional evidence. Vorith paused, his compound eyes reflecting mild annoyance. Ambassador Chin, the vote has concluded. There is no additional evidence that can change the outcome. I am not asking to change the vote, Dr. Chin replied. I am asking you to understand what you have voted against. What you have rejected. I am asking for 5 minutes of this council's time to show you something that happened 3 months ago in the outer reaches. Something that involves this assembly directly. Silence fell across the chamber. Representative Krill's translator device crackled with his confusion. Nothing involving humanity has occurred in the outer reaches. We would have been informed of any significant human activity in that sector. You were not informed, Dr. Chin said, because the humans involved in this incident violated multiple Galactic Assembly regulations. They entered quarantine zones. They ignored evacuation orders. They used experimental technology without proper authorization. And they did it all knowing that their actions would likely result in severe sanctions against Earth, possibly setting back our petition for another century. Now she had their attention. High Chancellor Vorith settled back into his seat. You come before this council to confess violations? I come before this council to show you who we are, Dr. Chin replied. She held up the small sealed container she had been carrying. This contains a complete recording of what happened at Colony Station Kelthara 3 months ago. I ask permission to present it. Voritha's mandibles clicked together in the Zenthari equivalent of a thoughtful frown. Colony Station Kelthara was destroyed in a plague outbreak. The station was under mandatory evacuation and subsequent sterilization protocols. All species were successfully evacuated before the sterilization began. What could humans possibly have to do with that tragedy? Everything, Dr. Chin said softly. We had everything to do with it. The High Chancellor exchanged glances with several other senior council members. Dr. Chin could see the calculation in their eyes. Whatever violations humanity had committed, the political embarrassment of refusing to hear evidence after such a dramatic build-up would be worse than spending a few minutes watching a recording. Very well, Vorith said finally. You have 5 minutes, Ambassador Chin. Use them wisely. Dr. Chin walked to the center of the chamber where the main holographic projection system was located. She placed the container into the interface port and entered her authorization codes. The chamber's lights dimmed automatically as the holographic displays activated. What you are about to see, Dr. Chin said as the first images appeared in the air above her, is classified footage from the Earth Medical Service ship Hippocrates. The recording begins on day 1 of the Kelthara outbreak, approximately 76 days ago. The hologram showed a space station, one of the standard modular designs used for frontier colonies in the outer reaches. It was home to approximately 40,000 beings from 89 different species, one of the Assembly's great success stories of multi-species cooperation. The station orbited a gas giant in a system rich with valuable minerals but far from any major trade routes. Then the image changed to show the interior of the station. Medical facilities overflowing with sick aliens. The unmistakable signs of a rapid onset plague. Dr. Chen's voice continued as the council watched in silence. The plague was identified as a mutated strain of Varitha's disease, a virus that affects silicon-based life forms. It should not have been able to infect carbon-based species, but the mutation allowed it to jump between different biological architectures. Within 24 hours, 60% of the station population was infected. Within 48 hours, that number reached 90%. The hologram showed the Galactic Assembly's response. Emergency quarantine protocols activated. All ships ordered to maintain a minimum distance of 10,000 kilometers from the station. Plans drawn up for complete sterilization of the facility once the uninfected had been evacuated. It was standard procedure, logical and necessary to prevent the plague from spreading to other worlds. But then the hologram showed something else. A single human ship approaching the quarantine zone. It was not a warship or even a proper medical vessel. It was a converted cargo hauler called the Hippocrates, retrofitted with laboratory equipment and emergency medical bays. The ship crossed the quarantine line despite repeated warnings from assembly peacekeeping forces. In the council chamber, several delegates made sounds of disapproval. Violating quarantine protocols was one of the most serious offenses in galactic law. The Hippocrates was commanded by Dr. Marcus Webb, Dr. Chin continued, a human medical researcher who had been studying Varitha's disease for 15 years. When he learned about the outbreak at Kelthra, he requested permission from the assembly to attempt a treatment intervention. That request was denied because the risk of spreading the plague was deemed too high. Dr. Webb disagreed with that assessment. The hologram now showed the interior of the Hippocrates. Dr. Marcus Webb was a man in his 40s with tired eyes and hands that never stopped moving. Around him worked a team of 23 humans, all medical personnel, all volunteers. They wore full containment suits as they prepared to dock with the infected station. "This is insane," one of the crew members said in the recording. A young woman named Dr. Lisa Park. "Even if we can synthesize a treatment, the assembly will revoke Earth's petition. They will impose sanctions. They might even classify us as a rogue species." Dr. Webb looked at her with those tired eyes. "There are 40,000 people dying on that station, Lisa. 40,000. The assembly's evacuation protocols saved less than 4,000 before the infection rate made further evacuation impossible. Everyone else has been written off as acceptable losses. Tell me, knowing that, how do we walk away?" No one on the Hippocrates had an answer to that question. So they did not walk away. They docked with Kelthra Station and went inside into the heart of the plague, knowing they might never come back out. The hologram showed what happened next, and 700 delegates watched in absolute silence as humanity revealed exactly what kind of species it was. The Forgotten Colony. The holographic display shifted to show the interior of Kelthra Station, and the watching council members instinctively recoiled. The corridors were filled with the sick and dying, their bodies exhibiting the horrific symptoms of the mutated Varitha's disease. Silicon-based Lithians whose crystalline structures were fracturing and dissolving. Carbon-based Corvians whose feathers had fallen out in clumps, leaving raw, bleeding skin. Aquarians whose containment suits had malfunctioned, leaving them gasping in toxic atmosphere. Species that should never have been vulnerable to the same pathogen were all succumbing together. Dr. Marcus Webb and his team moved through this nightmare with focused determination. The recording showed them setting up mobile laboratories in the station's main conference center, working with equipment they had brought from the Hippocrates. Dr. Webb's voice came through clearly as he coordinated his team. "We need tissue samples from at least 20 different species. The mutation has allowed this virus to jump biological architectures, which means it is adapting in real time. We cannot create a single cure. We need to understand the adaptation mechanism itself." Dr. Lisa Park worked beside him, her hands steady despite the chaos around them. "Marcus, even if we identify the mechanism, synthesizing 20 different treatments will take weeks. These people have days at most." "Then we work fast," Webb replied simply. He turned to address his entire team through their suit communications. "I know what we are asking is impossible. I know the odds are against us. But if there is even a 1% chance we can save some of these people, we have to try. Humanity did not come to the stars to calculate acceptable losses. We came to help." The hologram showed the next 72 hours in compressed time. The human medical team worked without sleep, taking stimulants to stay alert, rotating through brief rest periods only when their bodies could no longer function. They collected samples from dying aliens. They ran hundreds of analyses, mapping how the virus was adapting to different biological structures. They argued about treatment approaches, their voices sharp with exhaustion and desperation. Dr. Webb made a discovery on the second day. The virus was not randomly mutating. It was following a predictable pattern based on the quantum signatures of different life forms. Silicon-based life operated on different quantum principles than carbon-based life, but the virus had found a way to exploit the underlying mathematical similarities. "It is beautiful," Webb said in the recording, his voice filled with tired wonder as he studied the data. Horrible but beautiful. This virus has evolved something that should be theoretically impossible. It is reading quantum states and adapting its protein structure in real time. Can we stop it? Asked Dr. Park. Webb stared at his displays for a long moment. Maybe. If we can create a treatment that disrupts the virus's quantum reading ability, it would not be able to adapt anymore. Each species' immune system could fight off the static version of the disease. That is theoretical physics, not medicine, Park objected. Then we better hope our theoretical physics is correct, Webb replied. The next section of the hologram showed something that made several council members stand up from their seats in alarm. The human team was constructing a device that generated controlled quantum fields. They were building it inside the station in the middle of a plague outbreak, using components that were never designed to work together. High Chancellor Voritha's voice cut through the recording. Ambassador Chin, are we seeing what I think we are seeing? Dr. Chin paused the hologram. Yes, High Chancellor. Dr. Webb's team constructed an unlicensed quantum manipulation device. This violated at least 15 separate Galactic Assembly regulations regarding experimental technology. That device could have destroyed the entire station, said Representative Krill, his translator crackling with alarm. A single miscalculation in quantum field harmonics could have created a cascade failure. Dr. Webb was aware of the risks, Chin replied. He calculated that there was a 17% chance of catastrophic failure. But without the device, there was a 100% chance that everyone on the station would die. He chose the option that gave people a chance to live. She resumed the playback. The device activated, filling the station with a quantum field that human sensors could barely detect. The virus, however, detected it immediately. Across the station, infected individuals began to show changes. The virus stopped adapting. It locked into its current form. But one stable virus was still 89 different diseases. Dr. Webb's team had to create treatments for each one, and they had to do it fast because people were still dying. The hologram showed the humans splitting into smaller teams, each one focusing on a different species. They worked in the station's medical bays alongside local doctors who were themselves sick but refused to stop helping. A human doctor named Chin Rodriguez worked with a Lithian physician whose crystalline body was fracturing, the two of them synthesizing a treatment even as the Lithian could barely move. Another human, Dr. James Kim, stayed awake for 60 straight hours helping an Aquarian medical team adapt their water-based pharmaceutical techniques to create treatments that could work in their unique biology. The breakthrough came on the fourth day. Dr. Webb's quantum approach worked. The virus could no longer adapt, and targeted treatments began to take effect. The first patient to show improvement was a young Corvian child, her feathers beginning to grow back, her vital signs stabilizing. Her mother, who had maintained a vigil beside her the entire time, made a sound that needed no translation. It was relief and joy and disbelief all at once. More patients began to recover. The human team moved through the station delivering treatments, helping overwhelmed medical staff, doing everything from advanced virology to basic nursing care. Dr. Park was recorded cleaning waste from a Zenthari elder who was too weak to care for himself, her hands gentle despite the filth. Dr. Webb himself spent 6 hours straight performing surgery on a species he had only read about, following guidance from a local surgeon through an audio link because the surgeon was too sick to hold instruments. But the hologram also showed the cost. 3 members of the human team became infected despite their protective suits. The quantum field had stopped the virus from adapting, but it had not made the disease any less deadly for those already exposed. Dr. Chin Rodriguez was the first to show symptoms. She isolated herself immediately, refusing treatment resources that could go to others. "Give the cure to someone who has a family waiting for them," she said in the recording, her voice already weak. "I knew the risks when I came here." Dr. Webb tried to argue with her, but Rodriguez cut him off. "Marcus, we came here to save people. So save people. Just not me. Save as many as you can." She died 14 hours later. 2 more humans followed her in the next 2 days. Their bodies were cremated on the station according to human custom, and their ashes were scattered in space with full honors from the grateful station population. By the end of the second week, the plague was contained. 92% of the infected survived, a rate that should have been impossible. 36,000 lives saved, representing 89 different species from across the Galactic Assembly. The hologram showed the aftermath. The Hippocrates prepared to leave, knowing that Assembly authorities would be arriving soon to investigate the quarantine violation. The station survivors gathered to say goodbye to the humans who had saved them. They brought gifts that the humans could not accept because their ship had no room. They offered honors that the humans politely declined. Dr. Webb stood in the station's docking bay, surrounded by aliens from dozens of worlds. His team was down to 20 members now, 3 of their own lost to the plague they had fought. He looked exhausted, older than when the recording had begun. A Lithian elder approached him, her crystalline body showing the scars of her illness. She spoke through a translation device, her voice chiming with emotion. "Why did you come? You owe us nothing. Your species is not even part of the assembly. Why risk your lives for strangers?" Dr. Webb was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because we could help. Because that is what you do when someone needs you. Because walking away from people who are dying just because the math says you cannot save them all is not something humans are capable of doing." The Lithian elder reached out with one crystalline hand and touched Webb's arm in a gesture of profound respect. "Your council rejected you today. They said humans are too emotional, too irrational, too driven by instinct rather than logic. After what you have done here, I think I finally understand what they mean. And I think they are fools for believing those things are weaknesses." The hologram ended there. The lights in the council chamber came back up slowly, and Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the silence that followed. 700 delegates sat in their seats, none of them speaking. Some were staring at the now empty space where the hologram had been. Others were looking at Dr. Chen with expressions that ranged from shock to something that might have been shame. High Chancellor Vorith was the first to speak, his voice lacking its earlier certainty. "Ambassador Chen, when did Earth's government learn about this incident?" 6 days ago, Chen replied. "When Dr. Webb and his team returned to Earth orbit and immediately turned themselves in for violating quarantine protocols. They expected to be arrested. Instead, they were debriefed and I was given this recording and sent here to show it to you." "Why?" asked Representative Krill. "You knew this would not change our vote. You said so yourself. Because you need to understand what you are keeping out of your assembly," Dr. Chen said. Her voice was steady but carried an edge now. "You judged humanity by our capacity for violence while ignoring our capacity for compassion. You focused on our history of warfare while overlooking our history of sacrifice. You called us emotional and irrational, and you were right. We are." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from 100 different worlds. "Humans make decisions based on emotion. We act on instinct. We form irrational attachments to strangers and risk our lives for abstract concepts like honor and loyalty." Dr. Webb knew he had only a 17% chance of success and an 83% chance of destroying everything, but he tried anyway because people needed help. "That is who we are. That is what you voted against today." Ambassador Threll stood up, his feathers showing colors that Dr. Chen did not recognize. 3 of your people died saving species that had voted to exclude you from this assembly just hours before." "Yes," Chen said simply. "That is illogical," said Councillor Vess, but her crystalline voice carried uncertainty now. "Perhaps," Dr. Chen agreed. "But 36,000 beings are alive right now because humans are illogical. 89 different species have families that came home because we make decisions with our hearts instead of computers. If that makes us unworthy of your assembly, then so be it. We will continue to be unworthy in the same way. We will keep helping people who need help, keep risking everything for strangers, keep choosing compassion over calculation." She picked up the data container from the projection system and placed it on the podium in front of High Chancellor Vorith. "Dr. Webb asked me to give you something. It is the complete documentation of the quantum treatment device his team built, including all the technical specifications and theoretical frameworks. He said that the next time a plague like this happens, you should not have to wait for irrational humans to violate your laws. You can save people yourselves." Dr. Chen turned to leave, but Vorith's voice stopped her. "Ambassador, what will happen to Dr. Webb and his team?" She looked back at him. "Earth's government has not decided yet. Some want to prosecute them for violating assembly law. Others want to give them medals. Personally, I think we will end up doing both. That is also very human." As Dr. Chen walked toward the chamber exit, something unprecedented happened. One delegate stood up. Then another. Then a dozen, then 100. By the time Dr. Chen reached the doors, all 700 delegates in the Galactic Assembly were standing in silence, watching her leave. High Chancellor Vorith called an emergency session for the following day. The vote on humanity's admission was not technically reversible, but there were other matters to discuss. Like why the Assembly had been willing to write off 36,000 lives as acceptable losses. Like whether logic without compassion was truly wisdom. Like what it meant that a species too emotional to join their ranks had just taught them all a lesson in what civilization actually requires. 3 months later, Earth received a new communication from the Galactic Assembly. It was not an admission to membership. The rules could not be changed that quickly. But it was something else, something that had never been offered to any species before. An observer status, with permission to participate in humanitarian missions across the galaxy. An invitation to keep being illogical and emotional and human while the Assembly figured out what to do with a species that insisted on saving people instead of calculating optimal outcomes. Dr. Marcus Webb, when informed of the decision, reportedly laughed and said he hoped he would not have to violate too many more laws to help people. Then he got back to work on his research, already preparing for the next time someone needed help that logic said could not be given. Because that was what humans did. That was what they would always do. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy was beginning to understand that maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what civilization needed.